Hi, I'm Joyce. My grandmother left me an inheritance, but my parents spent every penny. They used what was meant for me to pay for my sister's college. By the time I found out, it was too late. All I could do was swallow my tears and turn the pain into fuel. Today, I'm going to tell you how I walked up to that graduation stage while my parents sat there, pale. So grab your coffee and come with me. My grandmother's death didn't just take her away. It quietly took the one thing I needed most, my right to dream. The house stayed silent for weeks, as if even the walls were mourning. She was always that sweet figure who made sure to treat me and my sister equally. I can still hear her gentle voice, holding our small hands. One day I'll leave something for you girls. And she did. In her will, she divided everything between her children and set aside a portion for each of us, her only granddaughters. That day, sitting between my parents, barely 15, my legs swinging nervously under the chair, I stayed quiet, my heart tight, not fully grasping the weight of what that meant. To me, it felt like an invisible gift, a piece of her love transformed into security for my future. Leaving the lawyer's office, my mom gripped my shoulder firmly, sealing a pact. "This is for your future, Joyce." I smiled, trusting completely. My dad added, buckling his seatbelt, "Don't worry, it's safe." I nodded, never asking for details. They were my parents, after all. Why would I need to? Meanwhile, my sister, 3 years older, was already stepping into adulthood. At 17, she was busy with applications and exams. It wasn't long before she used her share of the inheritance. She paid for her college enrollment and some initial expenses. It felt so natural, so fair. After all, she was ahead and everyone was cheering her on. From my quiet corner in the living room, I watched. Admired her drive, felt proud, and, I'll admit, a little jealous. I wanted to grow up too, make my own choices, use the inheritance Grandma had left me with so much love. I always believed my parents were taking care of everything. When Mom said, pouring coffee, "The money's safe," I believed her. Not for a second did it cross my mind that they might use it for something else. They were my parents, after all. And in my head, parents don't lie to their children, especially not about something that serious. So I kept living my days, going to school, hanging out with friends, making plans for when I, too, could finally fly just like my sister already had. Her leaving happened fast. One day we were having dinner, laughing at some silly joke. The next, she was dragging her suitcases through the door, headed to another state. I felt proud, of course. She was off chasing her dreams. But I can't deny there was a strange emptiness left in the house and in me. I admired her. I wanted to be like her. But at the same time, there was this silent sadness. I wished she'd look at me, give me some advice, tell me what it felt like to start college. But she grew more and more distant, as if I had frozen in time and she hadn't. Months passed and our relationship shifted. She used to tell me everything, even the smallest things. Now, she avoided talking about college, money, or anything I could use to prepare for my own future. When I asked, she'd respond with short, cold phrases. I figured it was stress adjusting to a new life. But it wasn't just that. There was something she didn't want, or couldn't, tell me. And me, naive as I was, I had no clue what it was. While she posted photos from parties, new cities, surrounded by friends I didn't know, I kept believing my money was there, waiting for me. It never even crossed my mind that it was already being used. Not for me, but to fund the very life I was seeing through my phone screen. I'd spend afternoons dreaming about the day I'd pack my own bags, use that money Grandma left, and pay for my own college. I planned the course, the state I'd move to, the clothes I'd buy. It all felt so real, so possible. My inheritance was safe, protected. All I had to do was wait a little longer. And that's how I lived for years, certain that my future was secure, until it wasn't. And I'll never forget the sentence that cut through me like a knife. Years later, when I finally uncovered the truth, I believed my future was safe. But little did I know it had already been spent. Some moments don't arrive with a bang, but with the deafening silence of realizing you've always been on your own. I always knew that when I turned 18, that would be my moment to leave. For years, I clung to the idea of going to college in another state, just like my sister had. I researched programs, cities, even small, cramped apartments where my dreams could fit. When I finally came of age, with my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might crack my chest open, I sat down with my parents at the same table where, years before, they had promised to keep my inheritance safe. I gripped the edge of the chair tightly, took a deep breath, and looked them in the eyes, still holding on to that last shred of hope. I'm ready. I want to use the money Grandma left me. I want to start college. The words came out shaky, but full of confidence and naivety. For a moment, the room filled with this heavy, suffocating silence, like a thick curtain that no one knew how to pull back. My dad rubbed his eyebrow, avoiding my gaze. My mom just kept folding a towel on her lap, distracting herself with something trivial, anything to avoid facing what really mattered. About that. Joyce, my dad started, his voice faltering, stumbling over each word as if he were stepping on broken glass. My mom cut him off, without even lifting her head, cold, direct, leaving no space for argument. There's no money left. My world stopped. I blinked several times, as if just opening and closing my eyes could change what I had just heard. What do you mean? Grandma's money, I insisted, feeling a sharp chill shoot up from my stomach and lodge in my throat. But their expressions left no doubt. The money was gone, and with it, a part of my trust in them disappeared too. After a few seconds that felt like hours, my dad let out a heavy sigh, like someone freeing themselves from a burden, and said as casually as if talking about the weather, "We used it to help your sister. She needed it." The words hit me like a punch I never saw coming. They had spent everything. The inheritance my grandmother had left for me, that should have been my ticket to my dreams, had been used to pay for enrollment, housing, trips, even vacations. And no one, absolutely no one, thought I deserved to even know. My first instinct was to get up abruptly, my legs trembling, and run straight to my sister's room. She was staying at the house for a few days. I barged in without knocking, my heart screaming. "Did you know?" She was lying there, scrolling on her phone, her fingers gliding over the screen of her perfect little life. She slowly looked up, feigning surprise with that same fake innocent expression she always used when she wanted to play dumb. "No, what?" she asked, putting on a show of ignorance I knew was a lie. She always knew. That realization tore me apart from the inside out. It wasn't just my parents who had betrayed me, but also the person I had admired, followed, defended for years. They had formed a silent alliance, where I was the only one who didn't know the rules. All of them conspired to keep me in the dark, while my life was slowly mortgaged, in the name of my sister's success. In that moment, a part of me shattered, permanently. It wasn't just about the money. It was about trust, about love, and about realizing who I was in that family. Nothing. I went back to the living room, my chest heaving, eyes burning, and confronted my parents. I wanted to hear them say it was a mistake, that they were sorry, that they'd try at least to make it right. But no, my mom crossed her arms, looking me up and down like I was some spoiled child throwing a tantrum. "Joyce, you're being selfish and ungrateful. Your sister needed it more. You don't have the same potential she does." I swallowed hard, my throat burning, while my dad just nodded, as if confirming something so obvious it didn't need to be said out loud. I stood there, frozen, with the pain slicing through my chest, leaving no room for anything else inside me. Then came the sentence I will never forget. My mother, with that coldness I would only later recognize as her default tone, said, as calmly as if she were reading a shopping list, "You would have never made it through college, so it's better this way." She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She didn't hesitate. She just said it like sealing my fate. And in that second, I understood. To them, I had always been the daughter not worth the investment, the one who should settle for the leftovers, the one without the brilliance, without dreams worthy of being nurtured. That afternoon, I walked out of the house without even knowing where I was going. I wandered through streets that felt unfamiliar, even though they were the same as always. And yes, I cried. I cried all the tears I had never allowed myself before, because it wasn't just the money they had taken from me. It was my faith in them, my sense of security, my very idea of what family meant. I sat on a park bench, feeling the cold wind cut through my skin, and for the first time realized if I wanted to change my fate, I couldn't count on anyone but myself. And there, between warm tears and cold rage, I made the promise that would change my life forever. That day, I buried my innocence and decided I would prove them wrong. Some defeats break us, others shape us. And that day, I realized I was made of something they could never destroy. After that afternoon, something inside me changed forever. I could have accepted the sentence my parents handed me. I could have just settled into the idea that I wasn't good enough. The label they had repeated so many times, as if it could define someone's future with just a few careless words. But I didn't. Every tear I cried on that park bench dried up, evaporated and condensed into anger. And that anger became my fuel. I didn't want revenge, at least not the kind they'd imagine. I wanted to prove them wrong, to prove that I was capable, that they would have to watch me win, even after they left me with nothing. I started studying like I never had before. I woke up before sunrise, when the sky was still a dark blue stain, and the streets were empty and cold, just to go over material. I spent afternoons taking practice exams, and nights devouring textbooks, my eyes burning, but my mind steady, while my classmates went out, laughing, partying, posting their smiling photos. I stayed in my room, surrounded by notes and problem sets. I applied for every college scholarship and entrance exam I could find, all over the country. I couldn't afford to mess up. There was no plan B. It was win, or go back to that house and hear every single day that they were right. To support that brutal routine, I got a part-time job at a cafe near school. I washed dishes, wiped tables, took out trash. In the small breaks between shifts, I'd hide my study guides behind the counter and sneak in pages. The smell of strong coffee and wet floors my constant companions. It was exhausting. My feet were always swollen. My arms ached. My hands covered in small burns and cuts. But I couldn't stop. At night, I'd collapse onto the hard bed in my cramped room, staring up at the mold-stained ceiling, imagining the day I'd pack my bags and leave that city behind. I didn't have money. I didn't have support. But I had something they could never take from me. My will. Months later, when I was nearly out of hope, my body exhausted and my mind completely drained, I got the email that changed everything. I had been accepted with a full scholarship to one of the most prestigious universities in the country, in another state. I remember reading and rereading that email dozens of times, my hands shaking, my eyes full of tears. It was real. I had done it, on my own, without anyone needing to invest in me or believe in me. I ran, stumbling over my own words to tell my parents, still holding on to this tiny, foolish hope that maybe, just maybe, they'd be proud, that for once they'd hug me and say, "We're proud of you." But I should have known better. When I told them, my mom let out this short, dry laugh, almost a scoff. "You? At a college like that? You won't even last a semester." My dad just shook his head with that silent contempt that always hurt more than any shout. Of course it stung, more than anything they'd ever said to me. But at the same time, it gave me even more strength. If I needed a final push, that was it. I couldn't fail. I couldn't give them the satisfaction of being right. So I left. I packed up everything I owned, which wasn't much. A few worn-out clothes, my favorite books, and most importantly, my acceptance letter, which I kept like a trophy and a shield. There were no warm goodbyes, no tight hugs, just a cold wave from my mom at the door, like she was seeing off a neighbor, and the silent back of my father turned away from me. I got on that bus feeling like I wasn't just going to another state, I was going to another life, and that they wouldn't be able to control. When I arrived, I quickly realized reality would be even tougher than I had imagined. The room I rented was tiny, barely enough space for my bed and my books. The walls were paper thin, and the neighborhood dangerous. The scholarship money only covered the bare essentials. So I got another job, this time as a bakery clerk. I worked mornings, studied in the afternoons, and took on odd gigs over the weekends. I didn't have friends, no one to call when things got rough. The loneliness was heavy, but strangely also freeing. Every hardship taught me something new. Every sleepless night, every skipped meal, every silent cry made me stronger. I'd look in the mirror, dark circles under my eyes, skin worn down, and I'd tell myself like a prayer, no one else gets to decide my future. And that phrase became my mantra, my shield, my invisible armor, because if I had learned anything by then, it was that the world could take everything from me, but not my determination. They took my inheritance, but they could never take my strength. Some battles aren't won out in the open, but through the quiet persistence of someone who keeps moving forward, even when no one else believes they can. The months turned into years, and little by little, I carved out my place at the university. The classes were challenging, the professors demanding, the environment fiercely competitive, but I stood out. Every assignment I turned in, every exam I passed, was like patching up one more wound from that old scar my parents had left behind. It didn't take long for my name to appear on the honor rolls, in conference programs, on lists of award winners for research projects. Each trophy, each certificate, was a silent scream. I made it despite you. Soon after came internships with major companies. My resume grew stronger, and with it my network of connections expanded. Some professors became mentors, true guides, who saw in me a potential that my parents had never wanted to see, or maybe never allowed themselves to see. They introduced me to influential people in the industry, recommended me for key positions, and helped me build a path I'd never even dared to dream about before. Sometimes, late at night, alone in my room, I'd find myself wondering what my family would think if they knew. But the pride and the hurt were two walls far too high for me to want to climb over and tell them. While I was going through this transformation, news about my sister started trickling in, always through muffled voices of acquaintances or distant relatives. First, I heard she was struggling with her classes, failing some of her most important courses. Then, that she had lost her internship for lack of commitment. Later, I learned she had taken a break from some semesters, saying she was too tired and unmotivated. That same sister, the one who years ago had been put on a pedestal as the genius of the family, was now lost, directionless, without the strength to keep going. The last thing I heard was that she had moved back in with our parents, without finishing her degree. The girl who had everything, the inheritance, the emotional support, the security, was now back at square one, with no diploma and no clear future. I won't lie, I felt something strange inside me. It wasn't happiness, it wasn't relief, it was more like a quiet sadness, mixed with an unavoidable sense of justice. Life, somehow, had placed each of us exactly where our choices and our attitudes had led us. My parents, once so proud, now avoided even mentioning her. The social media accounts that used to be flooded with posts praising their brilliant daughter now sat silent, as if their lack of words could erase their shame. No one spoke about the pride of the family anymore. And me? I stayed focused on my own path. Not because I wanted to outdo her. That didn't matter anymore. But because I had finally realized that my life was about me, about what I could build, regardless of who believed in me or not. Even so, I won't lie, I never forgot what she allowed to happen. She knew they were using my inheritance to fund her life. And still, she stayed silent, pretending it wasn't her problem. That silence hurt as much as my parents' open betrayal. That's why, even though I didn't wish her harm, I couldn't truly wish her well either. I kept my distance, not out of revenge, but for protection. I didn't answer calls. I didn't reply to messages. The little I heard secondhand, always fragmented and impersonal. I didn't bother showing up for family gatherings or holiday parties. I was far too busy building a life I could be proud of. Every day away from them was one more day proving to myself that I didn't need anyone to be someone. Yes, it was lonely, but strangely, it was also freeing. While she went back home, I kept moving forward into the world. Some encounters aren't about reconciliation, but about bearing witness. The witness of someone who survived abandonment and still managed to go farther than anyone ever expected. I sent the graduation invitation almost out of obligation, with zero expectation that they'd actually come. It was more a formality, like following a social script that no longer held any meaning. Seeing them in the audience. Reconciliation? That wasn't part of my plan. I had made peace with their absence, or at least I thought I had. When I hit send on that email, I exhaled deeply, closed my laptop, and went back to living my life, just like I had done with everything else related to that family, leaving it all behind. The day of the ceremony arrived, and I woke up with my heart racing, but not from fear, from the thrill of achievement. It was the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. I put on my cap and gown, adjusted the tassel, and as I looked at myself in the mirror, I smiled. Not the kind of smile that tries to convince itself it's happy, but the kind that knows for certain that it is. I got to the auditorium early, took a deep breath, and sat with my classmates, each of us trembling with nervous excitement. When they called my class to line up, almost instinctively, I glanced quickly at the crowd, and there they were, my mother, my father, and my sister, sitting right in the front row, side by side, like a portrait frozen in time. My mother's face stiff, as if she wasn't quite sure why she was there, but unwilling to leave. My father fidgeting with his fingers, like he wanted to escape but couldn't. And my sister, with that lost, fragile look, like she didn't know whether to smile or cry. For a second, the world stopped. Then I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and kept walking, head held high, posture strong. I was no longer the girl they had humiliated. Now, I was Joyce, the top of my class. When my name was called, the entire auditorium erupted in applause. I walked up to the stage, eyes brimming with tears, but not one fell. I took the diploma in my hands, feeling the symbolic weight of that piece of paper. I exhaled deeply and prepared for my speech. I hadn't rehearsed a single word, but everything I needed to say had been carved into me for years. Like a scar, I gripped the microphone firmly and began. This victory is mine alone, because I built it, brick by brick, on my own, after losing what I thought was my right. I paused for a moment, letting the silence settle like a stone, and then continued. I lost my inheritance, but I gained something far greater, the certainty that I can get back up, even after being knocked down. As I spoke, my eyes searched the crowd and landed on that trio who, for so long, had made decisions for me, controlled my dreams, and defined my worth. I watched their faces change, first surprise, then discomfort, and finally, that pale, unmistakable realization that right there on that stage, I was no longer the fragile daughter they once knew. I was someone they could no longer control. When I finished, the crowd rose in a standing ovation. Classmates, professors, even strangers, clapping, some even crying, and the three of them just sat there, frozen, like statues of salt. They couldn't clap, they couldn't smile. All they could do was stare, with that mix of shock, shame, and something I'd only later recognize as regret. For the first time, I was at the center, and they were on the outskirts of my story. But it was my sister's expression that struck me the most. There was no arrogance, none of that silent superiority she always carried. There was sadness, maybe envy, maybe regret. I don't know. And honestly, in that moment, I didn't care. It wasn't about her. It wasn't about them. It was about me, about my ability to turn pain into strength. betrayal into motivation, and loss into triumph. I walked off that stage with my heart light, carrying a dignity they had never been able, nor willing, to give me. I passed right by them, without stopping, without hesitating, without looking for their eyes. I didn't need their validation anymore. I didn't need to hear, "We're proud of you," to know my own worth. I had graduated, with honors, with job offers, and most importantly, with the peace of knowing I did it all by myself. In that moment, I realized it wasn't me who should be ashamed. Some victories aren't celebrated with applause, but with the quiet certainty of someone who knows they've won. After graduation, as if the universe had finally acknowledged my silent struggle, the job offers started rolling in. Every email I opened felt like a subtle but undeniable reminder that all my effort had been worth it. Companies I had only read about in textbooks were now asking me to join their teams. I reviewed each offer carefully, without rush, until I chose the one that not only valued my work, but took me to a new city, a new beginning, far from everything that had once hurt me. With no grand goodbyes, I packed up and left. There were no hugs, no tears, and I didn't need them. The decision to keep my distance from my family wasn't made out of anger, but out of wisdom. I knew that going back to that environment would be like reopening a wound that had finally started to heal. I had to protect myself, preserve the woman I had become, the woman they always insisted I'd never be. I moved to a new city, rented a small but cozy apartment, and for the first time, I felt like I had a space that was truly mine, just for me. As I took my first steps in this new career, I heard through acquaintances that my sister was still living with my parents, unemployed, without direction, the same sister who had once been the family's great hope, now seemed lost. I didn't feel joy about that, but I didn't feel sad either. Life somehow always gives back what we plant. And though I never wished for her failure, I could never forget the choice she made, staying silent while they spent the inheritance. That was supposed to be mine. I thought a lot about forgiveness, and over time, I realized that forgiving doesn't mean letting them hurt you again. The forgiveness I found was quiet, internal, with no need for public declarations or forced reconciliations. I kept clear and healthy boundaries. We spoke rarely, just exchanged formal messages on specific dates, but the emotional bond, that no longer existed. And surprisingly, that absence didn't make me feel less like family, just more free. Today I know the real inheritance my grandmother left me wasn't the money my parents spent without my permission. It was the strength I had to forge when I found myself with nothing. It was the determination that grew out of their disregard, the courage that blossomed from their abandonment. I am my own inheritance. Every scar, every victory, every step I took alone. That's my legacy, non-transferable, irremovable. I kept occasional contact with my parents. Maybe they still believed they could hold some power over me, but I didn't let them. Not anymore. Now, I set the boundaries. Now, I decide when and how to talk. And above all, I decide who I am. I've always been the one making that choice. For the first time, I felt the weight and the lightness of full freedom. On my desk at work in my new office, there are just a few things: a laptop, a coffee mug, some plants, and a photo from my graduation. It's me, in my cap and gown, holding my diploma, smiling, with a steady, calm gaze. No one else is in that photo, and maybe that's the most symbolic part of all. I did this on my own. It wasn't luck. It wasn't privilege. It wasn't inheritance. It was resilience. It was choice. It was courage. I took a deep breath, looked out at the city through the window, the lights from the buildings reflecting on the glass, and smiled, a calm smile, with no need to prove anything to anyone. Only I know how hard this journey was. Only I know how much I fought to be right here. I looked at the photo again and whispered with a voice that shook, but remained steady. I did this without them. And then I closed my eyes with the absolute certainty of someone who finally won. They spent my inheritance, but they never spent my will to win. Did you like this story? Then you need to see the next one. They called me useless at dinner, and then my sister's boyfriend looked up and asked, "Boss, what are you doing here?" It's right here on the screen. Click it and come with me to another story about someone who refused to be erased